All right, for this part, what we do, in sewing, you almost always, when you're sewing sides together, they're right sides together unless you're doing French seams. But for this, I've embroidered on both sides, put my right sides together. This is the outer piece, and I took a 3/8 inch, a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch. I took a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way down on both sides. And then, the thing to remember when we're sewing these is press all the seams in the same direction. Either press them all to the right or all to the left. That's your lining and your outer piece. So I've got my piece right here. I've taken it, I've sewn down 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way down, and now I'm going to make my gusset. Now, with the gusset, I'm taking it and I'm making a point. Let me just see. See, I've made a point with this seam right in the center. And what I do, I hope you'll be able to see this all right, or at least understand it. I take a ruler. Now, with gussets, I want to draw a line to sew on. I've decided I want a 4-inch gusset. That means I'm going to measure down from the top of this point 2 inches. So I put it on the 2-inch mark, and there's a line on the ruler, and I've lined it right up with my seam line so I know it's straight. And that's what I'm going to sew on. I just take my pencil or any marker. Probably should have got a different... Oh, let me grab a different pencil. He's not leaving a mark that you can see. Let's see. I can see it, but I don't think you can there. Is that better? Yeah. Now see? Now, we've got a line that I'm going to sew on. Then I sew on it, and then I mark the other one and sew on that. Okay, so then what we have, as you can see, I've sewn on that line right there. Now you could, if you wanted to, cut that off. I don't know. I'm just a whack job. I like to leave it that way. Even if the seam came out, I don't have a hole in the bottom of my bag. So we've sewn down the seam allowances. We've measured down 2 inches from the point, made a line, sewn on that on both of these. Then we're going to turn it right side out. Nice. So I want to show you how I start putting the handles on. There we go. Nice gusset. So, now remember I told you earlier we took our 5-inch by 27-inch piece of fabric, we folded it in half, pressed it, and then ironed it into quarters, and then I take it and I sew 1/4 inch seams down it. I can get 4 1/4 inch seams all the way down. Now you can decide how far apart you want your handles. I don't know. This is about, I don't know. You know, we're at like 18 or 19 inches. I count in, I'm on my mat here, so I got 1-inch squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put him there, even with the top, and I pin it. And make sure your handle doesn't get twisted or you'll be sad when you're done. Count on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put him right there. And I pin it. And I turn it over and I just use those that I've pinned. Make sure he's in the same place. Pin it. Same thing over here. Line it up. Make sure I'm not twisted. Pin it. There, now I have my handles pinned in place. The next thing we do, I take it to the sewing machine and I sew them less than 1/4 inch, and I just tack them down, all 4 of them, so now they're all sewn in place and I can remove the pins. Now with our lining, on our outer fabric, we sewed both sides all the way. On the lining, we sew one side all the way, and then we leave a space. I sew down about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches, leave about a 6, 7 inch gap, and then sew up again. Because what we're going to do, and then we put our gussets in it. But what we do, we're going to put, we've got our bag turned right side out, and we have our lining wrong side out, because we're going to put the right side of the bag against the right side of the lining. Line up our seams. Now see, by pressing all our seams in the right direction, because the lining is being pinned right side against the right side of the bag, our seams nest really nicely. And I'm going to, I pin that. Make sure all my handles are tucked in. Line up my seams, nest them, and pin them. And then I pin at the handles where the handles cross. Now if we were careful in our cutting and we took the same seam allowance, that should fit perfectly. Go around the other side. Pin that. Line it up and pin it. Now we've got our tote bag was right side out and our lining was wrong side out. We're putting right sides together, the right side of the outside bag to the right side of the lining. So we got seam out here, seam in there, right sides are together, everything's pinned. You would then take it to the sewing machine and start sewing. And see, that's what I did. I took a generous 5/8 inch. You could take a 1 inch. You see, we tacked on our handles on our bag, so that was one time the handles were sewn. Now we're sewing the lining to the bag, outer bag, and there's another time we're crossing over those handles. I sew all the way around it. I've left my opening here, so now I'm going to pull it out. There, now see, we got a mess like this. There's my opening. See, now what I would do, that's the opening we turned it, I would go and press that down, and then you could either whip stitch it by hand, but I just run a stitch right along the edge and get that sewn. Once that's sewn, now we tuck our lining down in the bag. So I tuck it in there nice and neat. Then what I do is I go to the ironing board, put it on the ironing board, and I press it all the way around, nice and neat. Just get them nice and sewn. And then all you have to do, once you've pressed that, once again, go to your sewing machine. And while you're sewing all these, sometimes I do just fine. This time I'm doing okay, but don't be afraid. If it looks like it's starting to bunch up, use your walking foot. So now I've pressed it, and then you can see the finished bag. What I've done is I've taken a top stitch, 1/4 inch from the top, and sewed all the way around the bag. So now that handle has been secured 3 times. Once when we top stitched it to the bag, then we put the lining, it got sewn off again, across again, and then when we top stitch along this edge. And that's really all there is to it. There we have a nice finished tote bag. I hope this answers your questions and that you'll try it.